A young woman vanished from her home on an island in rural Canada. Thousands of police, army, and local residents spent months searching for her. This is the story of how one tiny white hair solved the mystery of her disappearance while adding a new chapter to the history of forensic science. Prince Edward Island, Canada's smallest province, a 2,100 square mile vacation destination in the summer, cold and desolate in the winter. Father Eloi Arsenault has ministered to the islanders for almost 30 years.
We're not used to big violent things going on because people are very much down to earth and everybody knows everyone because we're a small community. There's not a very large population on the island, you know.
On October 7, 1994, a woman called police to report an abandoned car in a field near her house. The license plates were missing, and when police looked inside, they saw what looked to be a crime scene.
There were bloodstains, small specks of blood on the windshield, on the inside of the windshield, on the side windows of the vehicle inside.
These dots indicate the location of blood inside the car. Forensic scientists identified the blood as medium impact blood spatter, the type caused when someone is hit with an object like a fist. The serial number of the vehicle identified the owner as a local woman, 32-year-old Shirley Duguay.
And of course it raised some suspicion with us.
Shirley Duguay had been known in the past to take off for a couple of days, not tell anyone where she had gone, and then return.
Police suspected it was Shirley's blood in the car. The pillow she sat on while driving was found nearby, soaked in blood.
She was a very small, diminutive person, 4 feet 9 inches tall, less than 100 pounds. So very, very frail-looking individual. Other than that, we didn't know too much about her.
To identify the blood, scientists needed a blood sample from Shirley's father, Melvin, for DNA testing. Since Shirley would get half of her DNA from each parent, scientists found that the blood in the car contained 50% of Melvin Duguay's genetic markers, meaning the blood was Shirley's. While examining the blood, forensic scientists found something else. Blood that did not come from Shirley Duguay. Was this the blood of another victim, or possibly the blood of a killer? After Shirley Duguay's car was found abandoned and spattered with blood, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police began one of the largest searches in the history of Prince Edward Island. They checked hundreds of square miles and every waterway in the area.
We used psychics, we used hypnosis. Anything that we could put our hands on or could think of, we used it.
Some of the revelations were very unusual.
Psychics have even told us that she was buried near water or pine trees, shallow grave, but where? You know, you just don't know where to start.
About a half-mile away from Shirley's car, police found a shovel with 2 long black hairs attached. When scientists compared that hair to hair taken from Shirley Duguay's hairbrush, they were microscopically similar. The search for Shirley's body lasted for weeks. Then, investigators came upon a possible clue. 15 miles from Shirley's car, police found a plastic bag with a pair of sneakers and a blood-stained leather jacket inside. The blood on the leather jacket matched Shirley Duguay's DNA profile. But the jacket was a man's size, much too big to belong to Shirley. When police asked Melvin Duguay who might have wanted to harm his daughter, his response was startling.
I would have killed him. I would have killed that guy.
He was talking about Shirley's estranged husband, Doug Beamish, a demolition worker who had been separated from Shirley for the past 18 months.
I think I would have did a good deed if I had shot him, killed him. Because she'd be alive today. I'd be in jail, but she'd be alive.
During the couple's on-again, off-again 15-year relationship, police learned that Beamish had physically abused Shirley.
Every woman that lives with an abusive husband or boyfriend or whatever and end up murdered react in the same way. People advise them to not go with them or live with them, but for some reason they do.
Of the shoe, and again onto the outside of the shoe as to where they're walking to the wear on that individual's. I was quite satisfied that these shoes had been worn at the time by Mr. Beamish.
But Doug Beamish denied the sneakers were his. He also denied owning the leather jacket found with the shoes. Inside the jacket, investigators discovered even more evidence. 20 brittle white hairs. Under a microscope, the hairs did not appear to be human. Human hairs have thin medullas, the cord that runs through the center of the hair. These hairs had thick medullas, meaning they were animal hairs. But what animal? Constable Roger Savoy thought he had an answer. He remembered something from his interview with Doug Beamish. It was the type of observation we make hundreds of times each day, but usually forget.
Well, what's there to tell?
Savoy recalled that he saw a cat in Doug Beamish's home. But it wasn't just any cat. It was a pure white one. A cat Beamish called Snowball. Savoy also recalled that the cat rubbed up against his leg during his visit, leaving a number of white hairs on his trousers. Hairs that looked identical to the ones found in the bloody leather jacket. Investigators now wondered whether there was any way to prove scientifically whether the cat hairs on the leather jacket belonged to Snowball. 33-year-old Shirley Duguay was still missing, but a leather jacket stained with her blood was found 15 miles from her abandoned car. Police believe the leather jacket was the key to her disappearance.
The person involved in Shirley's death was likely wearing that jacket because it was not Shirley's jacket. So we had to put the jacket on somebody. We had to prove that jacket belonged to someone.
Inside the jacket were several brittle white hairs, which were suspected to be from Doug Beamish's cat.
If we could prove that it was this particular cat's hair, then we would be able to say, well, this belonged to Mr. Beamish, the jacket. And the job was to find someone that could do this type of testing.
Savoy made hundreds of telephone calls and found, to his surprise, that forensic testing on cat hair had never been done before anywhere in the world.
Like you would do some DNA testing for us.
But he was fortunate enough to come across Dr. Stephen O'Brien, a geneticist at the National Cancer Institute in the United States who had spent decades studying hereditary illness in cats.
The constable said to me on the phone, Dr. O'Brien, I've looked all over the country, in fact all over the world, for an expert in cat DNA technology, because I would like very much to know whether or not the hairs that were in the lining of the jacket, which are tied to the scene of the crime, because the jacket was covered with the victim's blood, are those hairs from Snowball?
Dr. O'Brien asked Canadian police for a blood sample from Mr. Beamish's cat. But this was more difficult than expected. Snowball wasn't at all cooperative.
It took approximately half an hour from chasing the cat from under the beds to every room in the house until it was almost like the cat knew that we were taking him in.
Roger Savoy told me he went down to the house and read out the cat's rights to the parents. And I said to Roger, what did the cat say? And he said, meow.
There's an old saying with the RCMP, we always get our man, but this case we had to go to say we always get our cat.
After finally capturing the cat, Snowball was taken to a local veterinarian's office for the necessary blood sample. Dr. Jane Bond drew the blood as two Canadian officers stood by to take custody of the sample in order to preserve the chain of evidence. Snowball's blood and cat hairs taken from the leather jacket were delivered in person to Dr. O'Brien and his team. One of the hairs contained a root, which was cut into pieces and put into a buffer solution which dissolved everything except the DNA. It was then amplified or photocopied so scientists had enough for their tests. The DNA profile of the hair found in the leather jacket was then compared to the DNA from Snowball's blood.
We got a very clear match between the genotype of each of the markers in the hair to each of the same markers in Snowball. And the only way that could have happened is that they came from the same cat.
But Prince Edward Island is isolated, and there are thousands of cats there. Was it possible, because of inbreeding, isolation, or just plain feline promiscuity, that another cat on the island had the same genetic profile as Snowball? If so, the DNA match would be useless.
You need to know that some other cat on Prince Edward Island couldn't have contributed that hair? What if 25% of the cats on Prince Edward Island had the same DNA profile, or 10%, or even 1 in 100 cats? So that's the next question you have to ask. What is the frequency of that profile?
Blood samples were taken from 20 cats on Prince Edward Island and sent to Dr. O'Brien and his team. The DNA profiles of these 20 cats showed a rich genetic diversity. The chance that the cat hair found on the leather jacket belonged to a cat other than Snowball was estimated to be 1 in 70 million. This was the break Canadian investigators had been hoping for. And then, after 7 months of searching, a fisherman found the last piece of evidence. "28 weeks into Shirley Duguay's disappearance, a fisherman along Canada's Armoire River saw a pile of brush on the riverbank that looked out of place. As he moved the brush away, he saw what appeared to be a human body.
It was a very shallow grave, dug just deep enough to cover the body. The person was a very tiny person. We knew Shirley Dugay was less than 5 feet tall, less than 100 pounds. Obviously, we expected it was Shirley Dugay.
I was alone by myself, and it started to snow. It was a freak snowstorm because, and I recall all I had on was a rain jacket, and I felt bad because the body was partly uncovered, so I took my rain jacket, which was all I had to keep warm, and put it on top of the grave to keep the snow off her.
Ironically, Shirley's body was buried in a spot nearly identical to what the police psychic predicted. Near the water, under pine trees.
It was just lucky that they found her when they did, because the police told me that within 2 or 3 weeks more, and they would have had a hard time to identify her because the ground was thawing out.
They knew that there was very little hope of finding her alive, and when they found her, they were very relieved in the sense that they knew at least that they could have a service for her and pray and get together, and they could sort of bring a closure to it.
At the autopsy, the cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma. Just as the blood spatter in her car suggested, Shirley's nose was broken and her jaw broken in 3 places. One of her front teeth was found embedded in her lung. Doug Beamish was arrested and charged with murder. Scientists discovered that it was his blood mixed with Shirley's inside her abandoned car. But what was his motive? Police discovered Beamish had written Shirley a letter threatening to kill her before he'd allow her to get custody of their children.
The whole letter was written in blood. It was just 1 page, mind you, but it was written in blood.
Although Beamish denied owning the leather jacket stained with Shirley's blood, police found this photograph taken the day before Shirley's disappearance. In it, he is wearing a jacket identical to the one found at the crime scene.
Well, actually, he has no defense at all, except to say I didn't do it. But I think if you interviewed all the prisoners in the prisons in Canada, they'd all say I didn't do it. That's pretty well. They've always got someone else to blame on. You know, criminals do that. They always blame someone else for their problems. They will certainly, you never see a criminal go in court and say, I did it, Judge.
After going to great lengths to cover up the crime, Beamish never realized that petting his cat before the murder would be his downfall.
1 in 3 criminals have cats, and maybe 1 in 4 have a dog. So when you go to the scene of the crime, and if there's a trace of DNA there, it's like leaving your name, your rank, and social security number, which can be used. and failing to have the individuals, if they leave their pets' parts there, that can implicate them too. This is what happened with Mr. Beamish. His pet cat implicated him.
Doug Beamish was tried and convicted of Shirley Duguay's murder and sentenced to 18 years in prison. The case is among the most celebrated in forensic history because it is the first time that animal DNA was used to convict a murderer.
Since then, we've received calls after the investigation, from all over the world. Literally, I received calls from Japan asking us how this worked. How did the animal DNA work?
I mean, I was actually surprised once the Snowball case became well known among the forensic community. I would say about once every 2 weeks, I would receive a phone call from a police department that was investigating a crime where a animal hair had been left behind, and they were asking us to help them.
T.S. Eliot penned these lines in his old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. You now have learned enough to see that cats are much like you and me. We've learned that applies to their DNA too. And Doug Beamish now wishes that this wasn't true. In a small town in Oregon in 1984, the first biological attack was launched against the United States. For over a decade, the details of this nearly catastrophic event were withheld from the public. This is how forensic science unearthed the biological trail. This small town in Oregon is called the Dalles and is perched high above the Columbia River, about 80 miles due east of Portland.
It seems like you've driven back in the 50s. And it seems, in the physical appearance, it seems frozen in time in that way.
Dave and Sandy Lutkins are among the 11,000 residents who find the Dalles the perfect place to raise a family.
A half an hour or an hour from skiing, a lot of water sports, a lot of hiking. It has pretty decent schools. We have pretty low crime.
On September 25th, 1984, David and Sandy both became violently ill with cramps, diarrhea, and vomiting. Their dehydration caused delirium.
But I've never felt that bad in my life. The room was spinning, and you just didn't care about anything.
Well, let's put it this way. I would never want to be that sick again.
When David and his wife went to the hospital, they weren't the only ones seriously ill.
And then suddenly there were so many people. We had people laying on the floor. We had people leaning up against the wall. There were people in the lobby.
They all had the same symptoms. Microbiologists identified the cause: Salmonella. Salmonella is a bacteria commonly found in eggs, meat, poultry, unpasteurized milk, water, and in animal feces, especially that of reptiles. It is rarely fatal, but sometimes death occurs in infants and the elderly. 10 days after the first outbreak, a second wave hit. The number of patients exploded from dozens to hundreds. Every hospital bed was filled. By the time Dave Lutkins emerged from 4 days of delirium, he encountered a disaster. Lutkins owned a small restaurant. 13 of his employees were sick, along with hundreds of his customers.
We had virtually no business. I mean, it just disappeared. It was tough. I mean, that was, I was in the process of building another facility in Hood River, and I was going to have it all paid for and opening up debt-free, and it didn't work out that way.
But what was the source of the outbreak? Food handlers who don't properly wash their hands after using the bathroom sometimes transmit salmonella. But hundreds of people were sick, and they hadn't eaten in the same restaurant or even the same restaurant chain. Tests of the water supply revealed nothing. The Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia was asked to investigate whether it was some type of accidental outbreak or was it intentional. Solving the riddle of the salmonella outbreak in Oregon is the job of epidemiologists, scientists who study how disease moves through large populations.
They seemed to be unrelated events, complicated things greatly. It was almost like doing multiple simultaneous investigations.
There seemed to be no common link among the hundreds of residents who had gotten sick. Dave and Sandy Ludkins both remembered eating a salad in their restaurant before getting ill.
I think we were too sick to worry that much about it at that time. It was later that we started, wondering if it was going to close us down.
Hundreds of their customers and most of their employees became ill too. At the county health department, Nurse Diane Kerr contacted everyone who fell ill and discovered they had all eaten a salad from one of 10 local restaurants.
Most of the people seemed to have eaten potato salad. At another restaurant, most of the people seemed to have eaten a green salad. And so what was going on?
They looked at common suppliers of food. They looked, where did everybody get their lettuce? Where did everybody get this? Where did everybody get that?
We couldn't find one source of cucumbers or lettuce or of meat or of anything that would explain all those restaurants being contaminated at once.
What do we got here?
Dr. Michael Skeels runs the laboratory that processed samples from the Dale salmonella outbreak. Microbiologists discovered that all of the victims had the same strain of salmonella, one that was exceptionally rare.
It was dulcitol negative, which means it didn't biochemically break down a sugar called dulcitol, and that's only the case for 2% of salmonellas of this type.
This salmonella had another odd characteristic. Unlike most bacteria, this one was not resistant to antibiotics. When all the cases were tallied, there had been 751 cases of salmonella poisoning. 10% were restaurant workers.
And these people became ill before the outbreak was noticed among customers.
Nevertheless, 2 months after the outbreak, the state of Oregon reported that poor hygiene of restaurant workers and cross-contamination were the most likely causes of the outbreak. In other words, they didn't know.
The Oregon Health Department basically hung us out and said, well, it was dirty employees. It was, it was unsafe practices, unsafe handling of food.
Officials found no salmonella in Dave Lutkin's restaurant, but they did find traces of it in some of the other restaurants.
If you've worked in public health long enough, you'll figure out that lots of times you really can't pinpoint where things come from.
The health officials said, this is the best we can tell you. It wasn't a very satisfying explanation for them or for the public or for the press, but at that time there was no other explanation.
Local officials now began to suspect a religious cult outside of town, the Rajneeshis. As the Rajneeshis expanded their compound, there had been growing tension between cult leaders and local politicians. Just a year earlier, one of the cult's leaders, Ma Anand Sheila, hinted at potential violence. She said, quote, "We are here in Oregon to stay at whatever the cost. If that means some blood is spilled, then this is the price we are prepared to pay." A guru from India, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, started the farming commune in 1981. After 2 years and $30 million, the 64,000-acre organic farming and meditation compound had its own post office, school, hospital, and shopping mall, with housing for over 1,000 followers.
There are doctors and lawyers and accountants who've given up everything to drive tractors and plant potatoes and have, daily chants.
As he drove through the compound each day in one of his 80 Rolls-Royce automobiles, the guru preached the benefits of meditation and free love. Published reports say that the Bhagwan claimed to have had more sex partners than anyone in history. In 1982, the Rajneeshis took over the nearby town of Antelope, and with it the majority of seats on the city council and school board, which horrified longtime residents of the small town. Before the outbreak, the Rajneeshis had set their sights on control of the larger town of the Dales and had put up their own slate of candidates running in the November election. In the absence of a scientific explanation, some thought the Rajneeshis might have intentionally poisoned the community in some way.
So there was suspicion, but there was no evidence.
Why would they do this? And the other thought was maybe there was somebody, some hothead, trying to incriminate the Rajneesh.
1 year later, the Rajneeshis' behavior grew even more bizarre, revealing evidence that would eventually solve the mystery. Since health officials could not find the source of the salmonella outbreak in the Dales, Oregon, suspicion among local officials continued to be the Rajneeshis, a religious cult living on a farm outside of town.
Like criminals being accused of poisoning someone who we had nothing to do with.
Leaders of the cult and town officials were often at odds. The cult was founded by Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, but the day-to-day operations were run by his associate, Ma Anand Sheila.
They met each other's needs. Sheila provided for him whatever he wanted. You want 60 Rolls Royces? We'll get you 60 Rolls Royces. You want a new disciple tonight? We'll get you a new disciple. You want to fly in a jet? We'll get you a jet. Whatever to make you happy. And the trade-off was that the Bhagwan would say, okay, you're number one, you're in control, you take care of all the details. I don't care how you do it.
The Rajneeshis were becoming paranoid for many reasons. They were being investigated for possible immigration fraud, and there was growing internal conflict between Sheila and other commune leaders.
Nonsense. You better believe me, I'm a tigress.
She and her group were in a power struggle with another group, which we always kind of called the Hollywood faction. They were rich members of the cult, headed up by a lady who was the ex-wife of a Hollywood producer. They had money. They had access to Rajneesh. And Sheila and her group were very paranoid about these people.
The struggle was for control of the guru, the cult, and its finances. Former cult members told of plans to assassinate several local politicians, rival cult members, a United States attorney, and journalist Les Zeitz, in retaliation for some investigative pieces he had written about the group in the local newspaper.
To be told that you're on a hit list for a group that I believe at the time they were capable of, I thought they were just purely evil folks by that time, it was really kind of chilling way to start the day.
1 year after the salmonella outbreak, without warning, Sheila and the head of the Rajneesh Medical Clinic, a nurse named Pooja, fled to Europe. Rajneesh disowned them.
They had turned it into a fascist concentration camp.
Prosecutors heard that Pooja had been experimenting with biological poisons at the clinic, including salmonella. But there was no hard evidence. With the increasing scrutiny, the Bhagwan stepped up the level of personal security.
There were times when he would move from one end of the town to the other, where he would be in a bulletproof limousine. He would have a lead SUV with armed guards in it. He would have a trailing SUV with armed guards in it, and he'd have a Jet Ranger helicopter in the air. We felt we could be confronted by a 45-person private army with fully automatic weapons.
In October of 1985, a federal grand jury issued a 35-page indictment charging the Bhagwan with lying on his visa application and arranging sham marriages so his followers could remain in the United States. When officials planned to search the compound, they asked epidemiologist Dr. Mike Skeels to come along because of fears of biological retaliation.
And as we were going up that road, I was thinking, you know, for a microbiologist, this is going to be a pretty interesting day.
No shots were fired. In the commune's licensed medical center, Skeels found samples of various bacteria, standard testing material for a small clinic.
One of these vials contained Salmonella typhimurium. And I remember at the time thinking, well, they told me to look for Salmonella. If I find any, I'm supposed to seize it as evidence, and well, there it is, so I'll seize it. But I wasn't thinking at all that this was related to the outbreak.
Shortly after the raid, Rajneesh left on one of his private jets. He was arrested in North Carolina on the immigration charges. Meanwhile, the CDC tested the salmonella found in the commune's lab using a technique called plasmid profiling. Plasmids are sections of free-floating genetic material outside a bacterial chromosome. Bacteria can exchange plasmids, allowing a colony to genetically adapt.
And you would then use the size of the plasmid and some other characteristics of it to see whether it matched the plasmids from other bacteria, mostly the size. And so if you found that you had the same plasmid type, you could assume that these were related or similar strains.
The salmonella from the Rajneesh's clinic had a plasmid profile similar to the organism from the Dales. And it could be killed by all antibiotics, just like the strain used in the epidemic.
That really was a smoking gun that showed us that the isolate that I found in their clinic and the isolates that we were getting from the people in this outbreak really were the same bacterial strain.
The question remained, why would the Rajneeshis poison the residents of this small town? Inside the Rajneeshi commune, investigators found evidence connecting the group to the mass salmonella poisonings, and they discovered other bizarre activities. Sheila had installed surveillance devices everywhere in the commune. Every payphone in the town was tapped, and almost every building.
This is the largest incident of wiretapping in the history of the United States. They wired this whole town. They were illegal interceptions. There were thousands of them. They had banks of tape recorders running all the time. It's indescribable.
Most Rajneeshis didn't know they were being monitored. It was kept quiet by Sheila and her inner circle, which held their meetings on her round bed.
A bookcase concealed a metal door opening onto a tunnel.
Or in secret rooms, complete with escape tunnels.
The FBI also found a number of manuals for making bombs and doing dirty tricks, and they found a number of articles about bioterrorism or biowarfare.
The salmonella was the weapon chosen for a power struggle, but not an internal one.
Wait, did I understand you correctly yesterday when you said that you were in fact now going to attempt to take over Wasco County?
That's correct. You understood right.
When the Rajneeshis put up their own candidates to run for election for the local county commission, they wanted to make sure their candidates won. To do that, they wanted to make the local voters sick enough so they couldn't get to the polling places to vote.
The Rajneeshis would have enough people in Antelope and other nearby places that they would all vote, 100% turnout among the Rajneeshis, enough that they would install their own candidates on the county commission.
But why had the outbreak happened in September? Informants say it was a rehearsal, and it wasn't their first. At Sheila's direction, the Rajneeshis took off their red robes and put on regular clothing and went through the town with spray containers filled with salmonella. In August, their first experiment was spraying the door handles in the county courthouse and produce in the local supermarkets. But no one got sick. Their second experiment in September was to spray salmonella on salad bars in 10 local restaurants, which worked, contaminating over 700 residents. Just before Election Day, the Rajneeshis made plans to contaminate the city's water supply. Apparently, they were unsuccessful.
There was evidence that someone had gotten to the reservoir for the city of Dallas and gotten into it, but no evidence that they actually ever contaminated.
All of the Rajneeshi candidates lost in the November elections. Armed with the forensic biological evidence, Sheila and Pooja were extradited from Europe and charged with tampering with consumer products. They both pled guilty, served less than 3 years in federal prison, were released, and fled to Switzerland before state charges could be filed.
Last we knew, Sheila was in Europe running the equivalent of a nursing home, which is sort of chilling to think about, turning Grandma over to Sheila in her final days.
There was no proof Rajneesh himself ever knew anything about the salmonella plot. He pleaded guilty to immigration violations, was deported, and died in India in 1990. Most of the restaurants targeted in the attack never recovered from the economic blow and went out of business. That's what happened to Dave Lutkin's restaurant.
We never regained the position we had in the community afterwards. I had people that would tell me that, I know it wasn't your fault, but I just can't eat there anymore.
He now runs a catering service. The scientists who investigated the outbreak wrote a paper about it, but the Centers for Disease Control asked that it not be published, fearing copycat crimes. In 1997, 13 years after the outbreak, when bioterrorism had become a growing concern, the paper was finally published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Evidence discovered in the Rajneeshis' health clinic revealed they had even more potent biological weapons in their possession. Had they been used, the results would have been catastrophic.
Neither the epidemiology alone nor a criminal investigation alone would have cracked this. It took both to put together.
Some confessions are spoken in court, some are whispered on a deathbed, and some are buried where nobody ever thinks to look. Not inside a police file, not inside an evidence locker, not inside the memories of aging detectives, but inside the walls of an abandoned church, sealed behind weathered timber and forgotten for more than 40 years. When construction workers began restoring the old St. Matthew's Mission outside Elko County, Nevada, in the spring of 2025, they expected to uncover rotten wood, cracked stone, and decades of dust. Instead, they discovered a small metal container wrapped in faded canvas and tied shut with rusted wire. Inside was a cassette tape, a folded letter, and a single sentence written across the envelope in uneven handwriting. If anyone ever finds this, tell them I lied. That sentence reopened one of Nevada's oldest unsolved murder investigations, a case that had haunted law enforcement since the summer of 1983, a case everyone believed had gone cold forever, a case built on silence. Because on July 18, 1983, 26-year-old Sarah Mitchell vanished, somewhere between the bright lights of downtown Elko and the empty desert highway stretching toward Lamoille Canyon. She never arrived home. She never used her bank account again. She never called her family. She simply disappeared into the Nevada night, leaving behind questions that would outlive almost everyone searching for the answers. The official timeline seemed ordinary. Sarah finished her shift at the Silver Spur Casino shortly after 10:15 p.m. Co-workers remember her laughing with another waitress while counting tips. She complained about the heat. She joked that the air conditioning inside the casino felt colder than the winter winds outside. Nothing about her behavior suggested fear. Nothing suggested she believed she was about to become the center of one of the state's most disturbing cold cases. She walked through the employee entrance carrying a denim jacket over one shoulder. She climbed into her cream-colored 1978 Chevrolet Malibu. She waved goodbye. Then she drove into the darkness. That was the last confirmed sighting. The following morning, Sarah failed to appear for breakfast with her parents. That alone was enough to alarm them. Every Sunday morning for nearly 5 years, she met them at exactly 8 o'clock. She was never late, never forgot, never canceled. By noon, her father reported her missing. At first, officers assumed the explanation would be simple. Car trouble, a weekend trip, an unexpected visit with friends. But as the hours passed, those possibilities disappeared one by one. Sarah's apartment looked untouched. Her purse remained missing. Her suitcase was still inside the bedroom closet. Her passport sat inside a desk drawer. The coffee cup she had left in the sink the day before was still there. Nothing suggested she intended to leave town. Late that afternoon, a rancher driving along State Route 227 noticed tire tracks leading away from the pavement. About 200 yards into the desert, he found Sarah's Malibu. The driver's door was closed. The windows were rolled up. The keys were gone. There was no blood, no obvious sign of violence, no note, no body. Inside the vehicle, investigators found Sarah's employee badge hanging from the rearview mirror. Her denim jacket rested neatly across the passenger seat. A paperback novel lay face down beside it. The page was folded as if she expected to continue reading later. The scene felt wrong. Too clean, too orderly, almost staged. Detectives searched the surrounding desert until sunset. Then again the next day. Mounted volunteers crossed dry washes and rocky hillsides. Helicopters flew low over miles of open terrain. Tracking dogs followed Sarah's scent for nearly half a mile before stopping abruptly near the edge of the highway. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Within 48 hours, the disappearance became statewide news. Newspapers printed her smiling photograph above headlines, asking the same question: where is Sarah Mitchell? Tips flooded the sheriff's office. Most led nowhere. One caller claimed Sarah had been seen in Reno. Another insisted she boarded a bus to Salt Lake City. Someone reported seeing her hitchhiking outside Wells. Every lead collapsed. Every witness contradicted another. The investigation drifted in every direction at once. Detectives interviewed family members first. Sarah's parents described her as responsible, independent, stubborn in the best possible way. She loved desert photography, old country music, long drives beneath open skies. She had recently begun saving money to buy a small house outside town. She had plans, specific plans. People with plans rarely disappear voluntarily. Friends painted the same picture. Sarah had no history of drug use, no criminal connections, no dangerous relationships that anyone knew about. She had recently ended a brief relationship with a local mechanic named David Collins, but co-workers described the breakup as calm. No threats, no arguments, nothing that suggested violence. Still, detectives questioned Collins for nearly 6 hours. He admitted they had spoken earlier that week. He admitted hoping they might reconcile. But he insisted he spent the night repairing an engine at his family's garage. Several employees confirmed seeing him there, without evidence placing him near Sarah's vehicle. Investigators released him. The case stalled before it truly began. Then, for days after Sarah disappeared, a truck driver contacted authorities. He claimed that around 11 p.m. on the night Sarah vanished, he noticed 2 vehicles stopped along the highway approximately 3 miles south of where Sarah's Malibu was eventually discovered. One appeared to be a light-colored sedan. The other was a dark pickup truck. He remembered slowing down because one of the trucks had its hazard lights flashing. He considered stopping to help. Instead, he kept driving. The memory haunted him after he saw Sarah's photograph on television. Detectives searched registration records for every dark pickup truck matching the description. Hundreds existed across northern Nevada. The witness could not identify the make. could not recall the license plate, could not describe the driver. The lead dissolved into another unanswered question. Summer turned into autumn. Search teams returned again and again. The Nevada desert revealed abandoned mine shafts, dry creek beds, collapsed cabins, miles of empty land. Nothing led to Sarah. The media gradually lost interest. Another headline replaced hers. Another tragedy claimed public attention. But inside the Elko County Sheriff's Office, Sarah Mitchell's photograph remained pinned to a corkboard beside a growing stack of reports. Every detective who inherited the file noticed the same strange detail. The timeline contained a gap, approximately 25 minutes. The drive from the casino to the location where Sarah's car was found should have taken no more than 12 minutes. So where had she spent the remaining time? Nobody knew. Investigators retraced the route dozens of times. They visited every gas station, every diner, every roadside business. Nobody remembered seeing Sarah. It was as though those missing minutes had simply disappeared. Then another detail surfaced. A waitress from a 24-hour diner recalled serving a nervous man shortly before midnight. He entered alone, ordered black coffee, paid cash, kept looking through the window toward the highway. She remembered him because his hands were shaking so badly he spilled coffee across the counter. When detectives showed her photographs, she hesitated at one face, not because she recognized him completely, because something about him felt familiar. The photograph belonged to Michael Grayson, a 38-year-old contractor who occasionally worked maintenance projects around Elko. Grayson denied ever visiting the diner that night, denied knowing Sarah, denied driving that section of highway. Nothing connected him directly to the disappearance. No fingerprints. No witnesses placing him beside Sarah. No physical evidence. Detectives noted the interview and moved on. Years later, one retired investigator admitted that decision haunted him more than any other, because Michael Grayson disappeared from Nevada only 6 months after Sarah vanished. He sold his equipment, closed his business, left no forwarding address. At the time, it seemed like coincidence. Decades later, it looked very different. The case drifted into silence. Boxes filled with reports moved from one storage shelf to another. Young detectives became veterans. Veterans retired. Evidence collected in 1983 slowly aged inside sealed envelopes. The desert kept its secrets. Sarah's parents died, never knowing what happened to their daughter. Her younger brother refused to celebrate birthdays after she disappeared. Every July 18th, he drove alone to the place where Sarah's abandoned car had been found and sat there until sunset, hoping the silence would finally answer the question the investigation never could. It never did. Not in 1984. Not in 2004. Not even in 2014. The file remained marked with 2 words that every detective hated reading. Cold case. Then, 42 years after Sarah Mitchell vanished into the Nevada darkness, a carpenter restoring the walls of an abandoned mission struck something solid behind a row of warped cedar boards. A metal box, no larger than a shoebox. Inside, beneath decades of dust, lay a cassette tape wrapped carefully in cloth. Beside it rested a handwritten confession, and at the bottom of the page, written in fading blue ink, were 6 words that would change everything. Michael Grayson was never the killer. This story is a work of fiction. All characters, locations, and events are fictional. 42 years. That was how long the truth remained trapped behind the wooden walls of St. Matthew's Mission. The confession was only 3 pages long. No signature. No fingerprints that investigators could immediately identify. Only faded blue ink and the unmistakable weight of someone who had spent a lifetime carrying a secret too heavy to keep. The first sentence changed the direction of the investigation before detectives reached the second paragraph. Michael Grayson was never the killer. For more than 4 decades, Michael Grayson had been an invisible shadow hanging over Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. His sudden departure from Cedar Falls County 6 months after Sarah vanished had fueled rumors for generations. Some believed he fled because he feared arrest. Others believed he had simply escaped before investigators caught him. The confession shattered both theories. Grayson had lied, but not about murder. He had lied because he was afraid. Detective Laura Bennett read the pages 3 times before saying a single word. Nobody in the room spoke. The silence felt heavier than the paper itself. Finally, she looked toward the evidence table. If he wasn't the killer. She stopped. Nobody needed her to finish the sentence. The question was already echoing through every investigator's mind. Then who was? The confession described the night of July 18th, 1983, with unsettling precision. Not dramatic, not emotional, just facts, times, distances, conversations, the kind of details only someone who had been there could know. According to the writer, Sarah never intended to drive home after leaving the Silver Spur Casino. She received a message moments before finishing her shift. Someone asked her to meet at an abandoned service station 12 miles outside town. The writer never explained why, only that Sarah believed the meeting concerned documents. Investigators immediately searched the original case file. No report mentioned documents. No witness ever claimed Sarah carried paperwork that night. Yet an inventory photograph taken inside her abandoned Malibu revealed something detectives in 1983 had overlooked. An empty manila folder lay beneath the passenger seat. It had been photographed, cataloged, ignored. Back then it meant nothing. Now it meant everything. The folder contained no papers. But the edges showed clear impressions where dozens of sheets had once been stored. Someone had removed them. Carefully, deliberately. Laura ordered the folder re-examined, using modern forensic imaging. Hours later, the laboratory delivered an unexpected result. Pressure marks remained inside the cardboard fibers. Not enough to recover the original documents. Enough to identify repeated handwritten words. One phrase appeared again and again. Red Canyon Survey. Nobody recognized the name. County archives held no property called Red Canyon Survey. Historical maps showed nothing. Old mining records listed nothing. It was as if the place had never existed, until a retired surveyor remembered hearing the name almost 50 years earlier. Not as a town, not as a mine, as a private land project that was quietly abandoned before construction ever began. The surveyor explained something stranger. Only 5 people officially worked on the project. Fred died. The 5th disappeared in the late 1980s. His name had never appeared anywhere inside Sarah Mitchell's investigation. Detectives felt the case shifting beneath their feet. This was no random disappearance. Sarah had been looking at something connected to land, something important enough that someone removed every page before abandoning her car. Laura reopened every archive box connected to local land records. Dust filled the air as investigators sorted through thousands of forgotten files. Receipts, blueprints, tax forms, permit applications. Nothing. Then an intern discovered a ledger hidden inside a cracked leather binder. Half the pages were missing. The remaining entries listed payments made under coded initials instead of names. One entry caught Laura's attention. SM delivery confirmed. The date matched the afternoon before Sarah disappeared. Who made the entry? What was delivered? No explanation followed. Just another mystery. Outside, reporters gathered around the sheriff's office. Word of the confession leaked within hours. News helicopters circled overhead. Headlines appeared across television screens. 42-year-old cold case reopened after hidden confession found. Residents who had spent decades believing the mystery would never end suddenly found themselves reliving the summer of 1983. Older witnesses returned. Some carried memories they had never shared. Others brought forgotten photographs, boxes stored in attics, journals, letters. Every object from that summer suddenly mattered. One elderly woman arrived carrying an envelope she had hidden since 1984. Inside was a Polaroid taken during the county fair just 2 weeks before Sarah vanished. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Children riding a carousel. Families eating popcorn. Nothing unusual. Until detectives enlarged the background. Sarah stood near the entrance gate, speaking with an older man. His face was partially turned away. His right arm rested against a pickup truck. Laura froze. The truck matched the description given by a witness 42 years earlier. Dark paint, chrome mirrors, wide front grille. The same truck investigators had never identified. Technology sharpened the image. Not enough for a complete facial identification. Enough to reveal one detail. The man wore a silver ring engraved with a distinctive triangular symbol. Laura searched historical photographs from the abandoned Red Canyon Survey Project. Every worker wore identical rings. Not jewelry. Membership insignias. The project had been more than a construction contract. It had been a private organization, one that vanished almost overnight. Every answer uncovered another question. Every clue suggested Sarah had stumbled onto something much larger than anyone imagined, and somewhere hidden behind 42 years of silence, someone else still knew the ending of the story. The symbol on the silver ring became the first real connection between Sarah Mitchell's disappearance and forgotten Red Canyon Survey Project. For decades, investigators searched for a person, a suspect, a vehicle, a witness, but they never searched for an organization. They never considered that Sarah's disappearance might not have started with a personal conflict. It might have started with something hidden beneath the Nevada desert, something valuable, something people were willing to kill to protect. The investigation team returned to the abandoned Red Canyon records. What they found was almost impossible to believe. The project officially existed for only 18 months. A private land survey operation. Nothing unusual. No criminal history. No public controversy. No reason for anyone to remember it. But when investigators examined the financial records, a different picture appeared. The project received millions of dollars in funding from several private investors. Then, without explanation, all activity stopped. The company dissolved. The workers disappeared. The records were sealed. It was as if Red Canyon had never existed, except Sarah Mitchell had found it, and someone had wanted to make sure nobody else did. The hidden confession continued to reveal new details. The writer described Sarah as someone who asked too many questions, someone who believed every document had a story, someone who could not ignore information that did not make sense. The confession claimed Sarah discovered a series of altered land records, properties that changed ownership overnight, companies created and closed within weeks, names that appeared on documents but belonged to people who never signed them. The deeper she looked, the more impossible the pattern became. And then she found something connected to Red Canyon, a missing survey report, a report that supposedly proved something existed beneath the land. The confession never explained exactly what was discovered. The writer only described it as something they were never supposed to find. Investigators immediately searched for the original survey report. Nothing. Every government archive, every private collection, every storage facility connected to the old project. Nothing. The document was gone. But another clue appeared. Inside the St. Matthew's mission wall, along with confession tape, investigators found a small key. No label, no marking, only a number engraved into the metal. 47. At first, detectives believed it was meaningless. Then an archivist recognized it. In 1983, Red Canyon Survey maintained a private storage facility outside Cedar Falls County. The facility was divided into numbered sections. Section 47 was the largest, and according to old records, it had been sealed permanently after the project ended. The team located the building 2 days later. It had been abandoned for decades. The windows were broken. The walls were covered in graffiti. The entrance was buried behind old construction debris. But inside, investigators discovered something unexpected. The storage rooms had never been emptied. Boxes remained stacked along the walls. Equipment sat covered in dust. Old maps hung from metal cabinets. It was a time capsule from 1983, a frozen moment. And in the center of the room was a locked cabinet. Number 47. The key from confession opened it immediately. Inside were hundreds of pages. Original Red Canyon documents, financial records, photographs, and one handwritten journal. The journal belonged to a man named Henry Calloway, a former project supervisor, a man who disappeared from Nevada in 1987, the same man whose name appeared nowhere in Sarah's original investigation. The first pages seemed normal. Daily notes, work schedules, equipment problems, employee disagreements. Then the entries changed. The tone became darker, more urgent. One entry dated 6 weeks before Sarah disappeared caught investigators' attention. She found the numbers. She found the transfers. She found the names. Another entry appeared 3 days later. We warned her to stop. Then, 1 week before Sarah vanished, Michael knows. But Michael is not the danger. Detectives immediately understood. The original investigation had focused on Michael Grayson, the mechanic, the man who left town, the obvious suspect. But Henry Calloway's journal suggested investigators had been looking in the wrong direction. Michael was not the threat. He was someone who knew the truth, someone who was afraid. The team listened to the confession tape again. This time they noticed something hidden beneath the main voice. A second sound, a faint background noise, a clock, an old wall clock. Experts analyzed the recording. They determined where the sound came from. St. Matthew's Mission. The confession had been recorded inside the same building where it was eventually found, meaning the person who left it there had access to the church, and they had recorded the confession after Sarah disappeared. The timeline changed again. The person who hid the truth had not forgotten. They had been waiting. The investigators examined the handwriting on the confession envelope. The first comparison was made against Henry Calloway's journal. The results were inconclusive. Similar style, similar pressure, but not enough. Then they compared it against another document, a maintenance log from St. Matthew's Mission. The signature at the bottom belonged to someone nobody expected, Michael Grayson, the man everyone believed had escaped, the man who had been accused for decades, the man who had never been found. The handwriting matched. Michael Grayson had written the confession, but that created a new mystery. If Michael knew the truth, why wait 42 years? Why disappear? Why let an entire community believe he was guilty? Investigators searched for any record of Michael after 1984. They found almost nothing. No employment history. No address. No financial activity. It appeared he vanished completely. But one record existed. A hospital admission from 1991, under a different name. A patient suffering from severe injuries after a construction accident. The photograph attached to the file showed an older man, scar across his face, different hairstyle, different name, but investigators recognized him immediately. Michael Grayson was alive, and he had been living only 3 states away. The man accused of murder had been hiding for decades. The man who wrote the confession had never left the truth behind. He had carried it with him. And now investigators had to answer the question that had remained unanswered since 1983. Why would an innocent man hide? Because the next discovery inside the Red Canyon files revealed something even more disturbing. Michael Grayson was not just a witness. He was there the night Sarah disappeared. And according to the records, he was the last person seen with her alive. For 42 years, everyone believed Michael Grayson was the answer. The man who disappeared. The man who walked away. The man whose name became connected to one of Nevada's most haunting mysteries. But the hidden confession changed everything. Michael Grayson was not the end of the investigation. He was a beginning. Because the truth was never about the man who vanished. It was about why he vanished and what he was trying to escape. When investigators finally located Michael Grayson, they expected resistance. They expected lies. They expected a man who had spent decades hiding from the consequences of his actions. Instead, they found an elderly man living quietly in a small desert town under another name. No luxury, no hidden fortune, no attempt to rebuild the life he lost. Just a modest house, a workshop filled with old tools, and a wall covered with photographs. One photograph immediately caught the investigators' attention. Sarah Mitchell, taken before she disappeared. Michael had kept it for 42 years. When detectives asked him why, he stared at the picture for a long time before answering, because nobody remembered who she really was. Those words changed the entire interview. Michael did not speak like a criminal trying to escape. He spoke like someone who had spent decades waiting for someone to finally listen. He admitted he knew Sarah, not romantically, not secretly, But professionally, Sarah had approached him weeks before her disappearance. She needed information. She had discovered that several vehicles connected to the Red Canyon Survey project were maintained at his garage. She believed the old project was connected to illegal activity. Michael initially dismissed her concerns. He thought she was chasing a conspiracy, until she showed him the documents. Documents that proved she was right. According to Michael, Red Canyon was not just a failed land survey. It was a cover. The project was created to hide something valuable beneath the desert, something that powerful people wanted control. The details remain unclear. Even after 42 years, Michael avoided saying exactly what had been discovered, not because he wanted to hide the truth, because he believed the people involved were still dangerous. Investigators asked the question everyone had waited decades to ask. What happened to Sarah Mitchell? Michael looked down. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he answered. She was trying to save evidence. The investigators listened carefully. According to Michael, Sarah contacted him on the afternoon before she disappeared. She told him she had copied files from the county archives, files connected to Red Canyon. She believed someone inside the system was helping cover up the operation. She needed somewhere safe to store the documents. Michael agreed to help, but before they could meet, someone found out. That night, Sarah received a phone call. Someone claiming they wanted to explain everything. Someone claiming they wanted to help. Michael said Sarah believed she could convince them to tell the truth. That was Sarah's greatest mistake. She believed everyone had a conscience. The confession tape revealed what happened next. Not everything, but enough. Sarah drove to the abandoned service station near the desert highway. Michael followed from a distance. He said he was worried. He knew Sarah was walking into something dangerous, but he arrived too late. When he reached the location, Sarah was already arguing with 3 people. Not 1, 3. The investigation had spent 42 years searching for 1 person, but there were 3. The first was Henry Calloway, former supervisor of Red Canyon Survey, the man whose journal revealed the hidden operation. The second was Richard Vail, a local businessman who financed the project, a name that had never appeared in the original case. And the third was someone Sarah trusted, someone from her own workplace, someone who had access to every document she was investigating, the person who knew exactly what Sarah had discovered, the person who could erase records before anyone noticed. Her name was Evelyn Hart, the county archive director, the same person who had approved Sarah's access to files. For decades, Evelyn Hart had been considered a respected member of the community. She organized charity events, helped local historians, received awards for preserving county records. Nobody suspected her, but the recovered documents told a different story. Evelyn had approved the creation of fake records. She had authorized the removal of original files. She had helped hide the existence of Red Canyon, and Sarah discovered it. The investigators reviewed Sarah's final work records. 3 days before she disappeared, Sarah requested access to restricted archives. The request was denied. The next day, she found a way inside. She copied documents. She recorded dates. She wrote down names. And then she disappeared. Michael told investigators that when he arrived at the service station, Sarah was alive. She was standing beside her car, holding a folder, arguing with Evelyn. He remembered Sarah saying one sentence, "I know what you did." Then everything changed. According to Michael, Richard Vail became aggressive. Henry Calloway tried to stop him. Evelyn stood silent, watching. The confrontation lasted only minutes, but those minutes destroyed 4 lives. Sarah's, Michael's, and the lives of everyone who spent decades carrying the secret. Michael admitted he did not call police. That decision haunted him. He explained that after Sarah disappeared, he found the documents she had hidden. He wanted to expose everyone. But then he received a warning. A message left on his garage phone. A simple sentence. People disappear when they ask the wrong questions. After that, Michael fled. He changed his name. He left Nevada. And he carried the truth with him. Investigators were faced with the most difficult question. Was Michael a coward, or was he another victim? The evidence suggested both. He failed Sarah, but he also preserved a confession that eventually revealed everything. The investigation now moved toward Evelyn Hart, but when detectives searched for her, they discovered something shocking. Evelyn Hart had died only 3 months earlier. She was 87 years old. She never answered questions, never faced accusations, never admitted anything. But before her death, she left behind one final letter, a letter addressed to the person who would eventually find it. Inside was a sentence that made investigators realize the truth was even bigger than they imagined. I was not the one who started it. And beneath that sentence was another name, a name that connected Red Canyon to a powerful organization that had been hiding for more than 40 years. A name that would reveal Sarah Mitchell's disappearance was not an isolated crime. It was a final chapter of a secret that began long before she was born. The name written at the bottom of Evelyn Hart's letter changed the investigation again. For 42 years, everyone believed Sarah Mitchell disappeared because she discovered a secret. Now investigators realized something far more disturbing. Sarah had not discovered the beginning of the secret. She had discovered the end of it. The organization mentioned in Evelyn's final letter was called the Silver Mesa Foundation, a name that appeared harmless, almost forgotten, a private organization created in the late 1970s. Officially, it supported desert conservation projects, historical research, and regional development across Nevada. It hosted charity events, funded local programs, donated money to schools. Its members were respected, influential, trusted, but behind the public image was a hidden history, a history buried beneath decades of paperwork. When investigators searched old foundation records, they found something impossible to ignore. Every major figure connected to the Red Canyon Survey Project had ties to Silver Mesa. Henry Callaway, Richard Vail, Evelyn Hart, even several officials who signed off on the original land transfers. They were not random individuals. They were part of the same circle, the same network, the same system that protected the secret. The investigators returned to the confession tape. They listened again. This time, they focused on the words that had previously seemed insignificant. The writer mentioned the agreement. Not a deal, not a contract. An agreement, something understood between people who already knew their roles. Something that existed before Sarah ever became involved. The question changed. What was Red Canyon really hiding? The answer came from a document discovered inside the sealed storage facility. A geological report, never published, never filed. A report marked with a warning. Property information restricted. Inside were maps, coordinates, scientific measurements, and references to a mineral deposit beneath the desert. Not gold, not silver, something far more valuable. A rare material used in advanced manufacturing. A resource that could have been worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The Red Canyon Survey was never about studying land. It was about controlling it. The investigators finally understood the motive. The land was purchased under false names. The records were altered. The project was shut down publicly. But privately, the operation continued. Sarah Mitchell discovered the paperwork, proving the entire scheme. She discovered that ordinary families had been pushed away from land that was secretly valuable. She discovered that officials had helped hide the truth. And she discovered names. Names of people who believed they were untouchable. The investigation team now had a complete picture of why Sarah became a target. But one question remained. Why did nobody kill Michael Grayson? If he knew everything, why was he allowed to survive? Michael answered that question himself. They didn't think I mattered. The investigators listened carefully. Michael explained that the people behind Red Canyon saw him as a mechanic, a worker, someone without influence. They believed nobody would believe him. And for decades, they were right. The public believed the story they were given. Michael was the suspicious man, the runaway, the possible killer. Sarah's family hated him. The community blamed him. His silence looked like guilt. But the truth was more complicated. Michael had been trapped by fear, and fear had protected the real people responsible. The detectives reopened every interview from 1983. One witness statement suddenly stood out. A woman named Linda Harper had reported seeing Sarah's vehicle near the abandoned service station. At the time, investigators dismissed her statement because her timing was uncertain. But when they reviewed it again, they found something strange. Linda described seeing 3 people, not 2. She saw Sarah. She saw a man near the pickup truck. And she saw a woman standing beside the service station entrance. In 1983, detectives assumed Linda was mistaken. Now they knew she had been right. The third person was Evelyn Hart, the woman everyone trusted, the woman who had spent decades appearing helpful, the woman who knew exactly how the investigation was moving. But the investigators discovered another problem. Evelyn was not acting alone. Her letter made that clear. She wrote, "I protected the wrong people because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't." That sentence suggested there was someone above her, someone more powerful, someone who controlled the others. The investigation turned toward Richard Vail. Vail had been a successful businessman in 1983. He owned several properties, had connections throughout Nevada, and had enough influence to avoid serious scrutiny. But when investigators examined his financial records, they found a disturbing pattern. Payments, large payments, sent to officials, consultants, private companies, all connected to Red Canyon, and one payment stood above the rest. A transfer made 3 days after Sarah disappeared. The recipient? A security company owned by Richard Vail himself. The description? Cleanup services. The phrase sent a chill through investigators, because for decades, nobody knew what happened after Sarah vanished. Now, they had a possible explanation. The cover-up began immediately. The evidence suggested that after confrontation, the group worked together. They removed documents, moved Sarah's vehicle, destroyed records, created confusion. Every action had one purpose: make Sarah Mitchell disappear. Not just physically, historically. They wanted her story erased. But they failed, because Sarah had done something they never expected. She trusted someone. She trusted Michael Grayson. And Michael kept the evidence. The investigators returned to his old garage records. Hidden beneath a false floor, they discovered a small metal box. Inside were photographs, notes, and a second cassette tape. Different from the confession. Different voice. Different location. Michael had recorded it himself. The tape began with him speaking. His voice was older, tired, but clear. "If you are hearing this, then I am probably gone." Investigators listened in silence. Michael explained everything he had learned after leaving Nevada. He explained why he never returned. He explained why he hid the evidence. Then he said something that changed the case again. Something that suggested Sarah Mitchell's final moments had been different from what everyone believed. "I saw her leave." The room went silent, because if Michael was telling the truth, Sarah did not die at the service station. She left. She walked away, alive, and someone followed her. The final seconds of the recording contained a sound, a vehicle engine, a door opening. Then Michael whispered one final sentence. The person who took her was someone she trusted, and beneath the sound of static, a name was spoken, a name that investigators had never considered, a name that would reopen every assumption made since 1983. The name on Michael Grayson's recording was almost impossible to believe. For 42 years, investigators had searched for strangers. They searched highways, desert roads, abandoned buildings. They searched for someone hiding in the darkness. But the final words on the tape pointed in a completely different direction. The person who followed Sarah Mitchell after she left the service station was not an unknown attacker, not a criminal passing through town, not someone from outside the community. It was someone who had been standing beside her all along, someone whose name appeared in the original investigation, someone investigators interviewed, someone they trusted. The name was Daniel Brooks, Sarah's closest friend, her co-worker at the Silver Spur Casino, the man who organized search groups after she disappeared, the man who spoke publicly about wanting justice. For decades, Daniel Brooks was remembered as one of the people who cared most about finding Sarah. Now investigators had to consider a terrifying possibility. What if he was not searching for the truth? What if he was protecting it? The revelation forced detectives to reopen every piece of information connected to Daniel. His statements, his timeline, his relationship with Sarah, everything. And what they discovered was a pattern hidden beneath years of assumptions. Daniel was always near the investigation, always involved, always informed. He knew details that were never released publicly. At the time, detectives believed he was simply helping, a concerned friend desperate for answers. But now, every conversation looked different. Every memory carried a new meaning. The investigators reviewed Daniel's first interview from 1983, a recording preserved on an old audio cassette. The detective asked him when he last saw Sarah. Daniel answered quickly, too quickly. He said he saw her leave work. He said she looked normal. He said she had no plans after her shift. But the newly discovered evidence contradicted that statement. Sarah had told someone about the meeting. Someone knew she was going to the service station. Someone knew about the documents. And according to Michael's recording, Daniel knew. The investigators searched Daniel Brooks' background. They discovered he had worked part-time for a company connected to Silver Mesa Foundation, a small administrative position. Nothing that seemed important in 1983, but the connection existed. He had access to information. He had access to people. And most importantly, he had access to Sarah. The investigation changed overnight. The person once considered Sarah's strongest supporter became the center of the case. News outlets followed every development. The headline shocked the state. Cold case breakthrough. Friend secret connection revealed after 4 decades. The community struggled to accept it. People who knew Daniel defended him. They remembered his efforts. They remembered him handing out missing person flyers. They remembered him speaking at memorial events. They said it was impossible. But investigators had learned one painful truth. Appearances could survive for decades. Evidence could not. The detectives traveled to Daniel's last known location. He had died in 2012. Another person connected to the case who would never face questioning. But his belongings remained. Inside his home, investigators found thousands of pages of personal notes. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Calendars, receipts, old photographs. Then they found a hidden drawer beneath his desk. Inside was a folder marked Sarah. The folder contained newspaper clippings, investigation reports, photographs, and handwritten notes. Not from 1983, from years later. Daniel had continued following the case. Even after everyone believed it was forgotten, he tracked investigators, collected information, recorded theories. It looked less like grief, more like obsession. Then detectives found the page that changed everything. A handwritten timeline of the night Sarah disappeared. Every detail, every movement, every conversation, including details that only someone present could have known. The final line read, "She knew too much. She had to be stopped." Investigators stared at the sentence. The words were not speculation. They were written as a fact. But one question remained. Why? Why would Daniel betray Sarah? Why would someone who appeared to care about her help destroy her life? The answer came from the financial records. Daniel was not just connected to Silver Mesa. He was dependent on it. For years, payments had been made to him through various companies. Small amounts, carefully hidden, enough to avoid attention, enough to keep him loyal. Sarah had unknowingly uncovered the same network, and Daniel knew what would happen if she exposed it. He would lose everything. But investigators still needed to understand the final night. Michael's recording provided another clue. He described Sarah leaving the service station, not running, not afraid, walking, because she believed the situation was over. She believed someone had finally admitted the truth. But then another vehicle arrived, a dark sedan. Daniel Brooks stepped out. Sarah recognized him. She did not see danger. She saw a friend. That was why she did not run. That was why she did not fight. The person approaching her was someone she trusted. Michael admitted he stayed hidden. He was afraid. He watched. and he regretted it for the rest of his life. According to his recording, Daniel spoke with Sarah for several minutes. They argued. Sarah accused him of betrayal. Daniel denied everything. Then he said something Michael never forgot. "You should have stopped looking." After that, Michael heard a struggle, then silence. When he approached, Sarah was gone. The investigators now had a possible timeline. Sarah discovered the corruption. Daniel informed the group. The meeting was arranged. The confrontation happened. And afterward, Daniel helped erase the evidence. But the case still had one missing piece. Where was Sarah? The evidence showed she left the service station. Her vehicle was found miles away, but her remains were never discovered. The desert had kept that final secret, until investigators found one more clue inside Daniel Brooks' hidden folder. A photograph. Old, damaged, almost destroyed. It showed a location outside Cedar Falls County. An abandoned underground structure built during the Red Canyon Project. On the back of the photograph were 4 words, "Where we buried everything." Investigators immediately searched historical records. They found references to an underground facility, a place built as part of the original survey operation, a place that officially never existed. The search team entered the location under the desert 2 weeks later. What they found inside changed the case forever, because buried beneath the ground was not only evidence of Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. It was proof that the conspiracy behind Red Canyon was far larger than anyone imagined. And hidden among the old files was a final confession, not from Michael, not from Daniel, but from someone who had been watching the entire investigation unfold for 42 years. Someone who knew exactly where Sarah was, and had been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. The underground facility beneath the Nevada desert had been forgotten for more than 40 years, buried beneath layers of rock and abandoned equipment. It remained untouched since the final days of the Red Canyon Project. When investigators entered the structure, they expected old machinery, broken tools, maybe documents. Instead, they found something that turned a missing person case into something much darker. They found a room hidden behind a reinforced steel door, a room that did not appear on any official blueprint. Inside were shelves, metal cabinets, boxes filled with records, and photographs. Hundreds of photographs. The walls told a story nobody expected. The Red Canyon Project was not simply a financial scheme. It was an operation built on control. For years, people had been tracking land ownership, monitoring residents, and collecting information about anyone who questioned their activities. Sarah Mitchell was not the first person to notice something strange. She was simply the first person who got close enough to expose it. Investigators carefully removed every piece of evidence. Each document was photographed. Each item was cataloged. And then they found the file that stopped everyone in the room. A folder with Sarah's name written across the front. The same handwriting appeared on the documents inside. Daniel Brooks, the man who claimed to be searching for her. The man who spent years pretending he wanted answers. He had been collecting evidence against her, not to help her, to monitor her. Inside the folder were copies of Sarah's notes, her research, her questions, even personal details about her family. The discovery created a disturbing picture. Daniel was not simply involved after Sarah disappeared. He had been watching her before. He knew what she was investigating. He knew where she was looking. And he knew how close she was to discovering the truth. But among the documents was something investigators did not expect. A letter written by Daniel, not to another person, to Sarah. The letter was never delivered. It was dated July 18th, 1983, the night she vanished. The opening line immediately changed the investigation. "Sarah, if you are reading this, then I failed to stop them." Investigators continued reading. The letter revealed that Daniel had not started as Sarah's enemy. He had been involved with Silver Mesa because of his family. His father worked for the foundation. His family benefited from the money. His future depended on the organization. But when Sarah discovered the truth, Daniel faced an impossible choice. Protect the people who controlled his life, or protect the person who trusted him. The letter suggested he chose both. And that decision destroyed everything. Daniel admitted he tried to warn Sarah. He admitted he wanted her to stop investigating. But he also admitted he could not let the Foundation know he was helping her. The situation became dangerous. And once Sarah discovered Daniel's connection, she stopped trusting him. The letter ended abruptly. No explanation. No final goodbye. Only one sentence. Someone else made the decision before I could. Investigators now questioned the entire timeline. Was Daniel truly responsible? Or was he another person trapped inside a much larger system? The evidence became more complicated, because inside the underground facility, they found another recording, a small digital transfer made from an old cassette. The voice belonged to Henry Calloway, the former Red Canyon supervisor, the man everyone believed was one of the leaders. His recording was made in 1996, 13 years after Sarah disappeared, and the words were terrifying. I thought removing her would end the problem. Investigators froze. The word removing, not killing, not harming, removing. The recording continued. Henry explained that Sarah had discovered something even Silver Mesa did not want exposed. Something beyond money, beyond land, something involving people who had influence far outside Nevada. He described Red Canyon as a project that began with investors, but later became controlled by people with power, people who could erase records, people who could silence witnesses, people who could make investigations disappear. Henry admitted he was afraid. He admitted he helped cover up the truth, but he claimed he was not responsible for Sarah's death. According to him, after the confrontation at the service station, Sarah was taken somewhere else. Not by Daniel, not by Michael, by someone with authority over everyone involved, someone whose name Henry refused to say. Then the recording ended. The investigators replayed it repeatedly. One phrase stood out. They never trusted us. Who were they? The question led investigators deeper into the Red Canyon operation. They discovered that Silver Mesa Foundation had connections beyond Nevada. Private companies, political donors, international investors. The operation was larger than anyone imagined. Sarah Mitchell had uncovered a secret that many powerful people wanted buried. But the biggest discovery came from a small notebook found inside the underground facility. The notebook belonged to Evelyn Hart, the county archive director, the woman who spent decades hiding behind a respected reputation. Inside the notebook were names, dates, payments, and one final entry written only days before her death. The truth will come out when the last person stops being afraid. Investigators believe that person was Michael Grayson, but Michael denied it. He said he kept the evidence because he was waiting for someone else, someone who knew more, someone who was there that night, someone who had never been investigated. The investigators asked him who. Michael remained silent for nearly a minute. Then he answered, Sarah's father. The room went quiet, because Sarah Mitchell's father, Robert Mitchell, had spent 42 years as the grieving parent, the man who searched, the man who demanded answers, the man who refused to believe his daughter was gone. Nobody had ever considered him part of the mystery. Michael explained that Robert discovered something after Sarah disappeared, something he never revealed. He found one of Sarah's missing documents, a document that showed the corruption, a document that proved who was involved. But Robert was threatened, his family was threatened, and he made a choice, not because he did not love Sarah, because he wanted to protect the only family member he had left. Investigators immediately reopened Robert Mitchell's old belongings. He had died in 2008, but his personal items remained stored with his family. Inside an old wooden desk, they found a hidden compartment. Inside that compartment was a sealed envelope. The handwriting was Sarah's. The date was July 18th, 1983, the night she disappeared. The envelope had never been opened. The investigators carefully removed the paper, and inside was a message that changed the entire case. Only 8 words. 8 words written by Sarah herself. I know who is behind all of this. Beneath the sentence was a name that nobody expected, a name that connected Sarah's disappearance to someone who had spent 42 years pretending to search for her And when investigators saw the name, they realized something horrifying. The person who knew the truth from the beginning had been standing beside the investigation the entire time. The name written on Sarah Mitchell's final note was not a stranger. It was not a hidden figure from the Red Canyon files. It was not one of the businessmen, investors, or officials investigators had spent months chasing. It was a name that had been spoken thousands of times over 4 decades. A name associated with grief. A name associated with searching. A name people believed represented the fight for justice. Robert Mitchell, Sarah's father. For several seconds, nobody in the investigation room moved. The discovery felt impossible. The man who spent 42 years demanding answers. The man who appeared in every newspaper interview. The man who organized searches across the desert. The man who stood beside Sarah's mother during every anniversary of her disappearance. That man had written a secret note. That man had hidden evidence. That man had known something. But the investigators quickly realized one important detail. The note did not say Robert was responsible. It said, "I know who is behind all of this." The meaning was different. The handwriting was Sarah's. The warning was Sarah's. But the name she wrote was not an accusation. It was a message intended for someone to find after she was gone. The question became, why did Sarah write her father's name? The answer was buried inside the hidden compartment with the letter, another document, a photograph, and a recording. The photograph showed Sarah and Robert sitting inside a small diner 3 days before she disappeared. Nothing unusual. A father and daughter having a conversation. But investigators noticed something on the table between them. A folder. The same type of folder that had been missing from Sarah's car. The same folder connected to the Red Canyon documents. Robert had seen the evidence before Sarah vanished. That changed everything. For decades, investigators believed Sarah was working alone. Now they realized she had shared her discovery with someone she trusted, her father, and Robert knew exactly how dangerous it was. The recovered audio recording from the underground facility provided the missing explanation. Robert's voice appeared on the tape. Older, tired, broken. The recording was made in 2005, 3 years before his death. And the first sentence was enough to explain why he carried the secret for so long. "I failed my daughter." Investigators listened as Robert described the days after Sarah disappeared. He admitted he found her research. He admitted he understood the danger. And he admitted he confronted the people connected to Red Canyon. But he never went to police. Because when he tried, he received a warning. Not from criminals. From someone inside the system. Someone who told him the investigation would be destroyed before it began. Robert was a father, not a detective, not a powerful businessman, not someone who knew how to fight an organization with money and influence. So he made the decision that haunted him for the rest of his life. He stayed quiet. The same silence that protected the people responsible. The same silence that allowed the case to remain unsolved. The same silence that made Sarah's family wait decades for answers. But Robert did something else. Something investigators never expected. He created a backup plan. He hid pieces of the truth. He scattered evidence. He left clues. Because he believed one day someone would find them. And eventually, someone did. The investigators now understood the purpose of the hidden confession. It was never meant to solve the entire case. It was meant to begin the search. Michael Grayson found the first piece. The Red Canyon files revealed the second. Sarah's note revealed the third. And Robert's recording connected them all. The investigation turned back toward the final night. What exactly happened after Sarah left the service station? The answer came from a forgotten witness. A man who had never been interviewed. Because he was never considered important. His name was Walter Kane. In 1983, Walter worked as a night security guard at a private mining facility near Red Canyon, the same area connected to the hidden underground structure. He was old, nearly 90 years old, and when investigators found him, he believed nobody cared about the past anymore. But when they showed him Sarah's photograph, his expression changed. "I remember her." Those words reopened the case. Walter explained that on the night Sarah disappeared, He saw a vehicle arrive at the facility, a cream-colored sedan, Sarah's car, but she was not driving. Someone else was. Walter said he saw Sarah sitting in the passenger seat, alive, angry, arguing. He remembered another detail. A second vehicle followed behind, a dark sedan, the same vehicle connected to Daniel Brooks. But Walter revealed something investigators never knew. Daniel was not alone. Someone else was inside, someone with authority, someone Walter recognized. The name shocked investigators, because it belonged to the person who controlled Silver Mesa Foundation during its most powerful years. Victor Ashford, a businessman, a philanthropist, a public figure, a man whose name appeared in newspapers across Nevada, and a man who died peacefully in 2019, never questioned, never accused, never connected to Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. Until now, the investigation uncovered a disturbing pattern. Every person connected to Red Canyon had one thing in common. They feared Victor Ashford. Henry Calloway feared him. Evelyn Hart feared him. Richard Vail worked for him. Daniel Brooks depended on him. Even Robert Mitchell was threatened because of him. The entire operation was not built around one secret. It was built around one person, Victor Ashford. But investigators still needed proof. A witness statement was not enough. A dead man could not answer questions. A hidden confession could be challenged. They needed something undeniable, something physical, something that connected Ashford directly to Sarah's final moments. Then, inside the underground facility, investigators found one final box, different from the others. Locked, hidden behind a concrete wall. Inside was a single object, a diary, not from Michael, not from Robert, not from Sarah, from Victor Ashford himself. And the first page contained a sentence that made investigators realize they had finally reached the center of the mystery. The girl discovered everything. The second sentence was even more shocking, but she was not the only one who had to disappear, because Sarah Mitchell was only the beginning. The Red Canyon secret had claimed more than one victim, and the next pages of the diary will reveal a truth that had been hidden for decades, a truth that would change the meaning of the entire cold case forever. The diary of Victor Ashford became the most important piece of evidence discovered in the entire investigation, not because it contained a confession, not because it described every detail of Sarah Mitchell's disappearance, but because it revealed something much more disturbing. Victor Ashford had been documenting everything, every decision, every person involved, every problem he needed removed. For decades, investigators searched for a hidden criminal operation. They finally discovered something worse. They found a record of how an entire system protected itself. The first pages of the diary appeared ordinary: business meetings, financial notes, names of investors, plans for future development. But as the entries continued, the tone changed. Ashford began referring to people as obstacles, not employees, not partners. Obstacles, people who could create problems, people who could expose information, people who needed to be controlled. One entry dated 6 months before Sarah disappeared caught investigators' attention. The archive employee had become unpredictable. The archive employee, Evelyn Hart. Another entry mentioned, the mechanic has seen too much. Michael Grayson. Another, the young woman is asking questions that cannot be answered. Sarah. The diary confirmed what investigators had suspected. Sarah was not randomly targeted. She was being watched. Long before the night she disappeared, Victor Ashford knew who she was. He knew what she was searching for, and he knew how close she was to exposing everything. But the most shocking discovery came from an entry dated July 18, 1983, the night Sarah vanished. The entry was only 5 sentences, but those 5 sentences changed the entire case. The situation at the station escalated. The documents were recovered. The girl refused to cooperate. Brooks followed instructions. The problem has been contained. Investigators read the words repeatedly. Contained. Not solved. Not handled. Contained. A word chosen by someone who viewed a human life as a problem to manage. The evidence now suggested that Daniel Brooks was not the mastermind. He was a participant, a person controlled by fear and pressure. But Victor Ashford was a person directing everything. The investigation returned to Daniel's hidden folder. The documents inside showed years of conflict. Daniel struggled with guilt. He wrote dozens of pages describing what happened after Sarah disappeared. He admitted he wanted to confess several times, but each time he stopped because Ashford made sure he understood the consequences. Daniel wrote, "He didn't threaten me with prison. He threatened me with losing everyone I loved." The investigators realized something important. The people involved were not united by loyalty. They were united by fear. Fear created the silence. Fear protected the secret. Fear kept the truth buried. But fear could not last forever, because eventually everyone connected to the case left behind evidence. And evidence has a way of surviving. The diary revealed that Sarah was taken to the underground facility after the confrontation, not killed immediately. Taken there, the investigators searched the location again, this time with new understanding. They were no longer looking for a missing person. They were looking for the final moments of her life. Inside a hidden chamber beneath the facility, they discovered something that stopped the investigation team cold. A wall covered with writing, dates, names, messages, a record left behind by someone who had been trapped there. At the bottom of the wall was a sentence carved deeply into the concrete. "If they say I ran away, they're lying." The handwriting belonged to Sarah Mitchell. For the first time in 42 years, investigators found Sarah's own words. Not a report, not a witness statement, not a theory. Her voice. She had been there. She had known she might not escape. And she left behind the truth. The writing continued. Sarah described the people involved. She described the documents. She described the confrontation. But the final message was incomplete. The last section had been damaged. Time, water, decay. Only fragments remained. Investigators could read only a few words. Daniel tried. Michael came. Someone else. Then nothing. The missing words became the final mystery. What did Daniel try to do? Did Michael attempt to save her? And who was the person Sarah referred to as someone else? The answer came from an unexpected source. A DNA sample collected from the underground facility. A fingerprint found on the old storage equipment. A print that did not belong to Sarah. Did not belong to Michael. Did not belong to Daniel. It belonged to Victor Ashford. For the first time, investigators had physical evidence placing Ashford at the location. The man who controlled the operation. The man who wrote about Sarah. The man who spent decades avoiding suspicion. He had been there. The case was no longer based only on documents and recordings. It had a direct connection. But the discovery created another question. If Ashford was there, why did nobody ever find evidence before? The answer was simple. Because the evidence was hidden intentionally. The underground facility was sealed. The records were destroyed. The witnesses were afraid. The people responsible controlled the story. They decided what the public knew. They decided what investigators saw. They decided what disappeared. But they could not control time. And time eventually exposed everything. The final pages of Ashford's diary revealed his greatest mistake. He believed everyone would remain silent forever. He believed money could erase memories. He believed fear was stronger than truth. But he was wrong, because one person refused to forget. Michael Grayson. One person preserved evidence. Robert Mitchell. One person left behind a warning. Sarah Mitchell. And one forgotten confession finally opened the door. The investigators now knew what happened on July 18, 1983. But one mystery remained. Where was Sarah's final resting place? The underground chamber held evidence, but not her remains. The diary suggested she was moved after the Red Canyon facility was abandoned, moved to another location, a location only Victor Ashford knew. Then investigators discovered one final entry, written years after Sarah disappeared, written by Ashford himself. The entry contained only coordinates, no explanation, no description, just numbers. When investigators entered those coordinates into a map, they discovered a place nobody had searched, a remote section of desert, miles away from Red Canyon, a place that had no connection to the investigation. Or at least, that was what everyone believed, until the search team arrived. Because beneath the empty desert floor, they discovered something that had been hidden for more than 4 decades. A structure, a sealed underground room, and inside that room, the final answer to the disappearance of Sarah Mitchell. The underground room beneath the Nevada desert had remained untouched for decades. No footprints, no broken locks, no signs of entry. It was a place designed to disappear. And for 42 years, it worked. The search team stood at the entrance in silence. Every investigator understood what they might find inside. The answer to a mystery that had haunted families. A truth that had been buried longer than some of the detectives had been alive. The steel door was covered in rust. The locking mechanism had almost completely failed. When the door finally opened, the sound echoed through the empty chamber. Inside was darkness, cold air, and a silence that felt heavier than the desert above. The investigators entered slowly. Their flashlights moved across the walls, across old equipment, across boxes stacked in the corner. And then they saw it, a photograph, placed carefully on a wooden table. A photograph of Sarah Mitchell, not from before she disappeared, from after. The discovery changed everything, because it proved one thing immediately. Someone had returned to this room after July 18th, 1983. Someone had preserved this place. Someone had been protecting the secret. The investigators searched every inch. They found documents, personal belongings, a jacket, a watch, a necklace, items that belonged to Sarah, items her family had spent decades hoping to see again. But the most important discovery was a small audio recorder, old technology, damaged, but still intact. The same type of device used throughout the early 1980s. The forensic team carefully restored the recording. When it played, the first sound was static, then breathing, then a voice. Sarah Mitchell. For the first time in 42 years, investigators heard her speak after her disappearance. Her voice was calm, not panicked, not broken, almost as if she knew someone would eventually find the recording. If you found this. A pause. Static. Then they failed. The room became completely silent. Sarah knew. She knew the truth would survive. The recording lasted only 11 minutes. But those 11 minutes revealed the final chapter of the case. Sarah explained that she discovered the Red Canyon operation while reviewing county documents. She found evidence of falsified land ownership, illegal transfers, hidden investors. But she also discovered something more dangerous. The operation was not only about money. It was about protecting the identities of people involved, people with influence, people who could not afford exposure. Sarah explained that after she confronted Daniel Brooks, she realized he had been manipulated. He was guilty, but he was not the person controlling everything. She described Victor Ashford as someone who never appeared directly, someone who allowed others to take the blame, someone who stayed invisible. Sarah said she believed Daniel wanted to help her, but he was trapped. Fear controlled him. The recording then became emotional. Sarah paused. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then she said, "Michael tried to save me." The statement changed the way investigators viewed Michael Grayson forever. For decades, he carried the weight of being suspected. Now Sarah herself confirmed the truth. He was trying to help, but he was too late. Sarah continued. She explained that after arriving at the underground facility, she was kept there while Ashford attempted to recover every copy of the documents. He wanted names, locations, evidence. He wanted to know everything Sarah had discovered, but Sarah refused. She refused to reveal where she had hidden the final copies, the same copies that survived for decades, the same evidence that eventually destroyed the secret. Then came the moment investigators had been waiting for. Sarah revealed where she hid the original documents. Not in her apartment, not with Michael, not with her father. Somewhere nobody would search. A place connected to her childhood. A place she believed would remain untouched. The recording ended before she could explain. The final seconds contained only one sound: a door opening, then a man's voice. Victor Ashford. Investigators enhanced the audio. The words were faint, but clear enough. You should have listened. Then the recording stopped. The evidence was overwhelming. The case was solved. But one question remained. What happened after the recording ended? The investigators returned to the underground chamber. They searched deeper, behind an old metal panel. They discovered another compartment. Inside was a handwritten journal. Not from Sarah, from Daniel Brooks. The journal explained what happened after that final recording. Daniel returned to the facility later that night. He found Sarah injured, alive, still fighting. And for the first time, he chose to act. He confronted Ashford. He told him the operation was over. He told him Sarah would not disappear. But Ashford had already made his decision. Daniel wrote that he watched everything collapse. The lies, the fear, the people who sacrificed others to protect themselves. He wrote, I spent 40 years pretending I was powerless. The truth is I was afraid. Daniel admitted he helped hide evidence. He admitted he helped maintain the lie. But he also revealed something important. Sarah did not die alone. Someone tried to help her. Someone risked everything. Michael Grayson. According to Daniel's journal, Michael returned to the facility after hearing the confrontation. He attempted to remove Sarah from the location, but Ashford had already moved the evidence. The confrontation ended with Michael being forced to leave, and Sarah was taken away. The final location remained unknown, until now, because Daniel's journal contained one final map, a map showing where Ashford moved Sarah after leaving the underground facility. Investigators followed the route, and they discovered another abandoned structure, a place hidden deep in the desert. Inside, they found the final evidence: personal items, documents, and a small wooden box. Inside the box was a letter, written by Sarah. But unlike the others, this letter was not a warning. It was a goodbye, a message intended for her family. The investigators opened the letter carefully. The first line brought tears to the eyes of everyone in the room. If this reaches you, please know I never stopped trying to come home. Sarah's final words revealed the human side of the case. Beyond the corruption, beyond the conspiracy, beyond the mystery, she was someone who wanted to survive. Someone who believed the truth mattered. Someone who believed someone would eventually find her. And they did. 42 years later, the Nevada cold case was finally cracked. But the final chapter was not about Victor Ashford. It was not about Red Canyon. It was not even about the people who tried to hide the truth. It was about Sarah Mitchell, a woman whose voice survived when everything else was taken away, a woman whose evidence outlasted every lie. But as investigators prepared to close the case, they discovered one final disturbing detail: a hidden page inside Victor Ashford's diary, a page written years after Sarah disappeared. A page suggesting Ashford was not the only person involved, because beneath the final entry were 3 words: there are others. And suddenly, the case everyone thought was finished was not finished at all. The words written at the bottom of Victor Ashford's final diary page changed the meaning of everything. There are others. 3 simple words. 3 words that transformed a solved disappearance into something much larger. For 42 years, investigators believed they were chasing one secret, one organization, one group of people desperate to hide a crime. But the final pages of Ashford's diary suggested something far more disturbing. Red Canyon was never the entire story. It was only one piece, a single operation inside a much bigger network. The investigators returned to the evidence room one final time. Boxes filled with documents, recordings, photographs. Every discovery from the past months sat under bright lights. The story that had once seemed impossible was now clear. Sarah Mitchell disappeared because she uncovered the truth. Michael Grayson remained silent because he was afraid. Daniel Brooks helped because he was controlled. Evelyn Hart protected the secret because she believed she had no choice. Robert Mitchell carried the pain because he wanted his daughter's story to survive. And Victor Ashford built a machine that kept everyone quiet. But the question remained: Who were the others? The investigators examined every page of Ashford's diary again. Hidden notes, symbols, initials, references that had seemed meaningless before. Now they began to form a pattern. Names appeared, not in Nevada, across different states, different companies, different organizations, all connected to the same financial structure. The Red Canyon Project was only one example. The investigators realized Sarah Mitchell had discovered something much bigger than illegal land deals. She had discovered a system designed to hide information, a system designed to protect powerful people, a system that survived because everyone involved believed the truth would disappear with time. But they made one mistake. They underestimated the evidence. They underestimated Sarah. Because Sarah had planned for the possibility that nobody would believe her. She created copies. She left clues. She hid information in places only someone who truly knew her would understand. The original documents recovered from the desert were finally analyzed. Inside were names, transactions, photographs, and one final document Sarah created herself, a personal statement, her last investigation report. The first line read, "If you are reading this, then I was right to be afraid." The report described everything Sarah discovered. She wrote about the people involved. She wrote about the pressure placed on her. She wrote about the moment she realized she was being watched. But the final paragraph was not about fear. It was about hope. Sarah wrote, "The truth does not disappear. People disappear. Records disappear. Stories disappear. But somewhere, something always remains." Those words became the final message of the case. Because something did remain. A forgotten box. A hidden confession. A damaged recording. A father's secret. A friend's guilt. A detective's persistence. Pieces of a mystery scattered across 4 decades. The official investigation eventually confirmed what many people in Cedar Falls County had waited their entire lives to hear. Sarah Mitchell did not run away. She did not abandon her family. She did not disappear by choice. She was a victim of a conspiracy built on silence. But she was also the person who broke it. The case changed the lives of everyone connected to it. The old community that once whispered rumors finally learned the truth. The people who defended the wrong individuals faced painful questions. The investigators who inherited the cold case realized something important. A case is never truly cold. Not while someone remembers. Not while evidence exists. Not while a family is still waiting. The story of Sarah Mitchell became a reminder that time does not erase everything. It only hides things. Sometimes behind locked doors. Sometimes beneath abandoned buildings. Sometimes inside a forgotten box covered in dust. The final investigation report was closed decades after the first one was opened. The words written across the file changed. From missing person to solved. But the investigators never considered the case a victory. Because solving a mystery does not bring back the years that were lost. It does not return birthdays. It does not erase pain. It does not give families back the moments they missed. For Sarah's family, justice came too late. Her parents never heard the truth. Her brother spent most of his life wondering. Friends grew old carrying memories of someone who never got the chance to grow old with them. But after 42 years, they finally had something they never had before. An answer. The desert that once held silence finally gave up its secret. The abandoned walls that protected the truth finally opened. And the forgotten box that started everything proved one thing. Secrets do not stay buried forever. Because somewhere, someone always remembers. Someone keeps a photograph. Someone saves a letter. Someone hides a recording. Someone refuses to let a name disappear. And in the quiet deserts of Nevada, where the wind still moves across empty roads and abandoned structures, the story of Sarah Mitchell remains a warning. A reminder of what happens when truth is ignored. A reminder of what happens when powerful people believe they are untouchable. And a reminder that even the darkest cold case can one day find its way back into the light. Because 42 years after Sarah vanished, the forgotten box was finally opened. The confession was finally heard. And the truth that everyone thought was lost forever was finally found. This story is a work of fiction. All characters, locations, and events are fictional. The final report was signed. The evidence was archived. The headlines slowly disappeared. And for the first time in more than 4 decades, the name Sarah Mitchell was no longer connected to a question. It was connected to an answer. But investigations rarely end when the files are closed. Some mysteries continue living in the memories of the people who touched them. For the detectives who uncovered the truth, the case became more than an investigation. It became a lesson, a reminder that every missing person leaves behind something: a photograph, a conversation, a forgotten message, a small detail that someone ignored because it seemed meaningless at the time. The entire case had survived because of those details. The coffee cup left behind, the old photograph from the county fair, the handwritten notes hidden inside a desk, the cassette tape sealed behind the walls of an abandoned building. The evidence was never gone. It was simply waiting. Months after the discovery, investigators returned to the underground facility one final time. They wanted to understand why Sarah chose that place, why she hid her evidence there, why she believed someone would eventually find it. Inside the chamber, they discovered something they had missed before: a small mark carved into the wall. Not a name, not a message, just a symbol. A circle with a single line through the center. The same symbol found on the silver rings worn by the Red Canyon members. But beside it was something different. A newer carving, made by Sarah. A final message. Only 4 words. Truth survives fear. Those words became the unofficial motto of the investigation, because every person involved had been controlled by fear. Fear of losing money. Fear of losing status. Fear of powerful enemies. Fear of the consequences of speaking. But Sarah had understood something they did not. Fear only wins when everyone stays silent. The investigation into the remaining Silver Mesa connections continued for years. Some names were confirmed. Some remained mysteries. Some secrets disappeared with the people who protected them. But the foundation that once seemed untouchable was gone. The network collapsed. The records were exposed. The story could no longer be controlled. And that was the one thing Victor Ashford feared most. Not prison, not public shame, not losing power. He feared the truth being known. Because once the truth is known, it cannot be buried again. Years later, a memorial was placed near the desert highway where Sarah's car was first discovered. There was no dramatic statue, no large monument, only a simple stone. Her name, her photograph, and a sentence chosen by her family. She searched for the truth. The truth brought her home. People who visited the memorial often expected to feel sadness. Instead, many described something else: peace. Because after decades of uncertainty, Sarah Mitchell was no longer a mystery. She was a person, a daughter, a friend, a woman who loved photography, a woman who asked questions, a woman who refused to look away when something was wrong. The case that once represented failure became something different, a reminder that cold cases are not forgotten cases. They are unfinished stories, stories waiting for one final piece, one overlooked clue, one person brave enough to speak, one forgotten box hidden in the darkness. Because sometimes the answer is not lost. Sometimes it is simply buried beneath years of silence, waiting until someone finally opens a door. This story is a work of fiction. All characters, locations, and events are fictional. The desert remained quiet, even after the headlines faded, even after the cameras left, even after the investigators packed away the final pieces of evidence. The land where Sarah Mitchell's story began continued to look exactly the same. Endless roads, dry winds, empty horizons, a place where people could disappear easily. But after everything that was uncovered, the desert no longer felt like a place of secrets. It felt like a witness, because for 42 years, the land had carried a story nobody wanted to hear. A story buried beneath abandoned buildings. A story hidden inside forgotten documents. A story written by people who believed time would protect them. They were wrong. Time did not protect them. Time exposed them. The final interviews with people connected to the case revealed something investigators never expected. Almost everyone involved had a moment when they could have stopped it, a moment when they could have told the truth. Evelyn Hart could have spoken. Daniel Brooks could have walked away. Michael Grayson could have gone to police immediately. Robert Mitchell could have revealed what he knew. Every person held one piece of the truth, but fear convinced them that silence was safer. And silence became the strongest weapon used against Sarah. That was the real tragedy of the case. Not only that one person disappeared, but that dozens of people watched the truth disappear with her. Years after the investigation ended, Detective Laura Bennett returned to the old evidence room. The shelves were almost empty. The boxes had been moved to archives. The photographs had been preserved digitally. The recordings had been restored. Everything that once seemed impossible to recover was now available for future investigators. On the final shelf was one small box. The original evidence box from the abandoned mission. The box that started everything. Inside was nothing dangerous. No secret documents. No hidden confession. Only ordinary objects. A broken cassette recorder. An old photograph. A faded envelope. And a handwritten note from Sarah. Laura had read the note many times. But one sentence always stayed with her. Someone has to remember. That sentence explained the entire case. Sarah never believed she could fight everyone alone. She never believed she could defeat a powerful organization by herself. She simply believed that if one person remembered the truth had a chance to survive. And that was exactly what happened. One person remembered, then another, until the silence finally broke. The story of Sarah Mitchell became known far beyond Cedar Falls County, not because of the people who tried to hide it, but because of the people who refused to let it disappear. Young investigators studied the case, not as an example of failure, but as an example of persistence. They learned that evidence does not always arrive in perfect condition. Sometimes it arrives damaged. Sometimes it arrives decades late. Sometimes it arrives inside a forgotten box covered in dust. But if someone is willing to look closely enough, it can still speak. The final official statement on the case was brief. No dramatic announcement. No celebration. Just a few words. The disappearance of Sarah Mitchell has been resolved. The truth has been recovered. For some, that was enough. For others, it never could be, because answers do not erase time. They do not bring back lost years. They do not replace memories. They simply close the door that has been left open for too long. And for Sarah's family, that door finally closed. They finally knew where she had been. They finally knew why she vanished. They finally knew that she never stopped trying to come home. On the anniversary of the discovery, a small group gathered near the desert highway. No reporters, no cameras, just family members, investigators, and people who remembered. The wind moved across the empty road, the same road where Sarah's car had been found decades earlier. But this time, nobody was searching. Nobody was asking where she went. Nobody was wondering what happened. The question that haunted a community for 42 years had finally disappeared. Only the memory remained. And maybe that was the greatest truth hidden inside the cold case. People thought the mystery survived because the killer stayed silent. But the mystery survived because Sarah's story was never forgotten. A missing person, a forgotten box, a hidden confession, a truth buried beneath decades of fear. All of it waited for the moment when someone would finally listen. And when that moment came, the past opened, the secrets surfaced, and the voice that had been silent for 42 years finally spoke again. Sarah Mitchell was no longer a cold case. She was no longer a headline. She was no longer a question without an answer. She was proof. Proof that the truth can be delayed. Proof that justice can take time. Proof that even the deepest secrets eventually find their way back into the light. Because in the end, the desert remembered, the evidence remained, and a forgotten box uncovered the truth